Okay, thank you for joining for this webinar about GenAI and what GenAI can do for you when it comes to tech doc delivery mainly. So I am the founder and CEO of Fluid Topics. And as you may know, Fluid Topics is a content delivery platform, which means a software solution that is dedicated to collecting all the information that you have around your product and create a unified repository of enriched content and serve that content through any touch point that you have where it makes sense to serve your customers, users, support agents, field technicians, and so forth. So this is what we do every day. We help tech industries achieve this digital transformation in customer support and field service operations. And we are lucky to work with large and small companies all over the globe, help them change the way they work, they deliver their content, and make it more efficient. So this is who we are. We'll stop here for now. And let's deep dive, let's go directly to the subject of the day. So today we are going to talk about GenAI and how GenAI can change the game along the chain from writing content a bit, but mostly downstream on how it can change the way people access that content and use your content. So it looks like being a very interesting subject. Several hundreds of you registered for that webinar, which is quite a good score for us. But we're not going to look at this subject from a tech writer perspective. I mean, it's not going to be about suggestive writing. You could do a lot on the CCMS side, so to say, when you really, as a tech writer, write your content, like creating code and diagrams, short description, document organization, all that, which relates more to how GenAI could be integrated into your real authoring, the writing part of your workflow in your CCMS. So we are going to focus more on the downstream side of that value chain. And another thing that I'd like to insist on, we are not going to bother here with LLM privacy confidentiality issues. We will assume that this is all solved, even though there are still some pending issues and discussions. And we know from our customers that some of you are very cautious about what they do and they can do with GenAI due to these privacy issues, but it's coming. And we see now vendors that provide LLMs that are taking that into account and being able to warranty that whatever you do with their LLMs will remain confidential. So we will assume it's so, and then we will just try to focus on what we can do with this GenAI technology. So it's going to be very pragmatic and down to earth, and we are going to try to fix only situations where that could be useful and make a difference. The first one, which is probably the only one on the upstream part of the chain, is how GenAI can help you change the entire authoring process. The way it works for most of you now is that you have a tech doc team in charge of writing content. What does it mean? It means that your tech doc team will interview subject matter experts, engineers, developers, collect the knowledge, and write the content, then publish the content. Which means as well that if you want to write more content, then you have to do more of the same, scale up that process, which means hire more tech writer that will interview more people and write more content. Or if you want to do it faster, that's the same. You need to increase your bandwidth. That's one way of doing, but there is another way, which is the scale out process, not the scale up, which means changing a bit the paradigm, the approach, and make everybody a content producer. So in that model, the tech writers become editors. They don't really write the content anymore. They ask people to write the content for themselves, okay? So then those subject matter experts will not tell you the story, but write it, start an interview, and usually they write with their own tools, which by the way, so it's going to be Word for, I don't know, more subject matter experts can be Markdown for developers, HTML for some in wikis, and they use their own day-to-day environment, and then they will provide you with that content that you will have to integrate. And in that situation, you have to review the content, and then tech writers also have to become copywriters and proofreaders, which is the bad side of this approach. And that's interesting because that approach makes more sense. I mean, not being in charge of writing everything, but leveraging the people that you have inside your company to be content producers. But as we see here, there's a downside to that, a drawback to that, that can be solved with GenAI. Because in that process that I just described, the SMEs write the content. Then as a tech writer, you have to rewrite that content. And probably here, you're going to use your content quality tools that are usually connected in your CCMS. It's like Schematron, Acrolinx, Congrid, those sort of tools. Then once you have rewritten that content, you have to go back to the SMEs to validate the changes, and then only you can publish, which means it's an intertwined process. So SMEs, then tech writers, then SMEs, which slows the entire process. But this is where GenAI can drastically simplify this process and the tech writer's job, because you can have still SMEs writing, and then instead of having the tech writers rewrite or make the content more readable, you can use GenAI for that. So it's GenAI fixing the content, and then SMEs validating the proposal of GenAI, rewriting on the fly, and you have this very short loop where subject matter experts can write, fix, validate until the moment the final content is good enough so that they can hand it over to the tech writers that will finalize the content and publish that content. And that becomes a sequential process, which means also less work for the tech writers and probably a work that is more interesting, because then the work of the tech writer in that sequential process is connecting that well-written content with the rest of the content to make it and to fill the gaps and create the links and put some metadata and all that. So we see here that GenAI is interesting in that approach of letting more people write and produce content by making sure that they write content that is properly written. And this is exactly what GenAI is good at. We all have been quite amazed by seeing ChatGPT writing and generating that content, and that's a capability of large language models that you can leverage in that situation. What is interesting as well, we could do one step further. So having this loop where SMEs write, fix content with GenAI, validate, and have this improvement cycle mechanism. But then instead of handing over the content to the tech writers themselves, you could imagine that they could directly pre-publish that to a staging environment. And in that part of the process where the content is published to a staging environment, the content quality tool could check the validity of some of those rules and ask the SMEs to make the change themselves until the moment the content is valid. And then it can go to the tech writing teams that apply more quality checking before publishing to the production environment. So we see that GenAI can be used as a helper to streamline content writing, content production, onboarding more people that are not as proficient as you can be as tech writers in producing sound and good, well-written content. So that's one example of where you can use GenAI in a very good and efficient manner. A second use case that we find very interesting is monitoring the consistency of information. And let me illustrate that, the problem to be solved. So say you have a product in version 1, and you have few guides around that set of content, installation manuals, maintenance, and then troubleshooting, question and answers, KB articles, and you start having a bunch of content, but the foundational content is really those guides that you and manuals that you have written. But then you start translating that content as well. So those manuals can be translated, say the installation guide and the instructions are translated in German, and one of these manuals is translated in French as well. And suddenly someone decides that this product, being a success, should be sold in Asia as well, but it has to be adapted, meaning that you have a variant of that product, which means that not only do you have to translate the content itself, but adapt the content to reflect how the product has been adapted to that market. And maybe you'll get from the Japanese team some question answers and a few KB articles as well. And then you do the same for the South American market, say, and you got a variant B of the same product. And it sells so well that now you have a version 2 of that product for the initial market. And then you update the manuals as well, installation, run manual. And then you have to adapt that as well, version 2 for variant A for the Asian market. So you see how it runs, and you have the ID. Now the question is, can you use, and can I say you mean your users, your support agents, your experts on the field, can you use a knowledge-based article that has been written initially that was applicable to version 1 in English? Is that still applicable and valid for version 2A in Japanese, on the Japanese market? Or if you have an article that has been derived initially from that V1 and translated in Japanese for V1 Japanese, does it work for version 2A of that product? And this is where it's a huge challenge for companies, because that's how it goes. You, with copy paste, you have all this content that pops up everywhere in different silos that usually is derived from the core foundational content that you have written. But the problem is making sure that this ancillary content remains consistent over time, and it's not creating problems by you providing the wrong information to the users. And that's certainly where we can use GenAI, which is checking consistency between first core and ancillary content, meaning that if the core content evolves, check the validity and the alignment for consistency with the content that has been initially derived from this core content, like KB articles, or say API specs the APIs are evolving. That's the other way around. Is the core manual still in line with the new specs of the APIs of the product, for example? So it goes both ways. And again, that's the same. You could use that for, you can use GenAI for checking the applicability of something that has been written for V1 and checking if this is still applicable and tag it as applicable for version 2A. So the idea is not necessarily to duplicate that content, rewrite that content, but probably just tag it as, yes, at least what we see here in this KB article that was written for V1, it's still applicable for V2A. You can still use that content. So that's where there is something that's very interesting, is really on the fly, validating, checking the consistency of all the content that has been derived from or written from initial product, initial foundational content. So that's a second use case. Third use case, it's about going global, meaning translation. So back to our product, we have this product for which we have different manuals, different guides, so installation, instructions for use, IFUs, Reaper, troubleshooting articles, KB articles, and all that. But same situation that I described earlier, you have different variants of the same product for different markets, then you start having different versions of that product that is evolving, and then you have that through multiple products, product lines. That's a lot of pages. And if you start exporting and sending abroad, then you have to ask yourself probably how much of that content should we translate? So depending on your domain, usually software vendors are pretty lazy and deliver most of the content in English. That's the domain. But when you do sell machine tools, or we have customers in the medical devices industry where they have to translate, so how much of that content should be translated? And that decision comes at a cost, because just a few numbers here. Imagine you have 5,000 pages, and 5,000 pages of content is not that much. So we do have customers that have 500,000 of pages in just one language for the products. The page is about 400 words, and typical translation cost, if you make this translation is done by an external provider, is about 10 to 20 cents a word. Okay, so meaning that 5,000 pages that have to be fully translated is probably about 300,000 euro dollars. That's almost the same. So okay, you can remove some repeats, something like that. Cost is more about 100. But if you sell in 10 languages, the translation for 20 countries, 10 languages, your translation cost may be about 2 million. And it's not even including the time you spent internally, the tools that you have to buy, translation management system, and all that is just the cost for having people translating, external agencies translating your content. So no wonder why translation service is a $50 billion market. Okay, that's a lot of money here. And this is why, as well, when you have to make decision on what content should be translated, most of you are pretty cautious about it. So that was, and there's a classical approach behind that when it comes to publishing content, because usually you write that content, you have that content translated, and then you publish the content, meaning that you have your CMS, you write in English, you send that content through your TMS to external providers that translate, say, in French, German, Japanese. And once you get that, you publish the 4 languages, the full translated version of that content into your CDP, into free topics, say, and then a Japanese user comes to the system, runs a search in Japanese, gets results in Japanese. That's how it works. So, but as we've seen, this adds complexity to the process because you have to wait and you have to have this content translated, assuming that it's easier for you if the content is all located in your CCMS. But again, if you start having content in Markdown and API documentation in Swagger, and the more sources you have, the more complex it is to manage the process, because it's a bit like herding the cats by collecting all that content, making that content being translated and so forth. So it's not an easy task, okay? Takes time, costs money, we've seen that. So that's how it is for most of you today. But there is an underlying trend, which is machine translation technology has evolved a lot over the past, say, just 5 years. And it's not good enough really to replace humans for TechDoc. Reason is, first, TechDoc language is usually simple. It has to be. I mean, when you write TechDoc, you have to make sure that it's usually simplified English. It has to be understood by anyone. So if you write in English, so usually you keep this unambiguous and pretty simple, which means straightforward to read is straightforward to translate. It can be jargonish, but you have the lexicons for that. So you know exactly how each word should be translated in different languages when it comes to your jargon. And most of you have already translated content in the past, and you have that pre-translated, already existing translated content that can be is validated translation that can be used to train those those engines. Okay, so that makes it really almost the optimal situation for using machine translation. And I did put a link at the bottom of the page. I chose this one, but there are today tens and tens of articles that you can find. I mean, scientific articles that put measurement that have really assessed and validated and measured the fact precisely that machine translation is as good, if not better, really, if not better than humans at translating TechDoc. I couldn't say the same for all kinds of material, whether marketing or literature, but when it comes to TechDoc, believe me, that's where we are today. So now, if we take that as a fact, which is the case, what can we do with that? Well, the answer is stop translating, stop spending money, and not to mention that most of the providers that you use for translation are in fact using machine translation, even though most of the time the prices are the same as when they were translating humanly, manually. The price is still the same, but they use machine translation, probably because the technology is emerging and they have to train and build the technology, so you pay for that. But honestly, you can stop translating manually like that and translate everything using machine translation technology in any language, and in most cases, you can do that on the fly, meaning that the process is revamped. If you have your content created, say, in English, you just publish immediately in English. That's it. And imagine now you have a user in Japan coming to your website, or doc website, or whatever, running a search. The keywords will be in Japanese, but the content is in English, which means that if you just run the keyword directly, there won't be any results because there won't be the search engine won't be finding the Japanese keyword in English content. Not a problem, because then you can first translate that query in English using machine translation services on the fly. Then you run the query in English on the English content, which gives you back a search result list in English that you translate silently, automatically on the fly in Japanese, and you send back to the user search results in Japanese, even though you don't have Japanese content. So the user can see the search result list, say, oh, this is what I need, click on the document to access, and you do the same. You translate the content on the fly and send back Japanese content to that user. And I said Japanese, you can imagine now it's Polish, Finnish, whatever language, that can be done with the same way using machine translation services on the fly. So as you see here, for this mechanism to work, it needs to be implemented as a core part of the CDP. It has to be part of a content delivery platform, because we have to catch the queries, translate the queries on the fly, translate the search result on the fly, track that. So it has to be part of the product itself. And you can even further refine that mechanism, because you could use a mix of pre-translated and on-the-fly translated content. And by pre-translated content, you could mix content that is translated and validated by people, content that is pre-translated by machine translation but not validated, is just read it, it's faster probably. You can use analytics to identify your most read content that you could pre-translate and let the rest of your content being translated on the fly. You could limit this capability to certain types of content for which you have less risk. That could be knowledge-based articles that are changing, Q&A database or whatever. That could be just for that content. And maybe you have some type of content that you want to be pre-translated and validated. But it does not mean that the fact that you deliver content in the language of the user shouldn't be limited to that content, because then you can apply on-the-fly translation for the rest of the content. You could make that capability, this feature of accessing content in any language, accessible only to chosen users, say partners or people that you have that know about it. You could tag the content as well to let people know that it's machine translated on the fly, so that from a legal perspective, because I see your legal department coming to you and say, oh, we can't do that, too risky, whatever. So you could tag that and warn the people, say, oh, we don't have that in, you are searching in Japanese. We don't have that content in Japanese, but we can show it to you in Japanese. Just know that it's real-time translation. And then you could even ask them to report any anomaly in translation at that moment. So you see, the mechanism itself is still valid, but can be refined so that it fits well into your process and your needs. So the good point here is that, in fact, there is almost no limit in the number of proposed languages. So if you were just translating in 4 or 5 languages because of cost, but you know that you have users, technicians fixing, maintaining your devices and you would need that content in 30 languages, you could still pre-translate and do something in 5 and let the rest be on the fly translated for the remaining 35 languages, which are probably a small part of your traffic, but which would have huge value for your users. Cost-wise, I let you do the math. It's pretty efficient, because the cost today of external machine translation is about 20 USD for a million character translated, and 40 USD, $40 for trained models. So if you use generic models, $20. If you train your model specifically with your past content, you put your lexicon and all that, becomes $40. But it means as well that, say, for 10,000 a month, so $120,000 spent per year, 10,000 a month, it means translating 3 billion characters, which means 1.2 million pages of content. So you see, you can really translate a lot of content on the fly before you just go to a tenth of what you were spending on with translation providers, translation agencies. So that's very interesting here, and not just for the cost reason. Again, just because it's streamlining the process and it opens new opportunities for you if you go global and you want to provide this content in any language. So that was use case number 3. Use case number 4, we are going more and more on the delivery side, downstream. So help users train themselves. So let me explain the idea here. So you write content, and good documentation is extensive and detailed. It has to be. I mean, it has to contain all the instructions on how to do things, install, maintain, repair, whatever. So say for example, we have a 40-page long procedure for configuring or maintenance task. Okay, very long, very deep, because it is detailed. The problem is that you write it that way, but it's very difficult to understand when a maintenance procedure is described across 40 pages and you're a new user. It's very difficult to understand what's in it without sifting through all the pages, those 40 pages, and you have to sort of read rapidly and say, okay, I will have to do this, then that. But it's in the middle of lots of details, screenshots, diagrams, whatever, depending on your content. And that makes it complex for the user to rapidly understand what will need to be done. So it's a frustrating user experience because new users got lost into this discovery. And on the opposite side, experienced users are usually not in need for all the details. They know how to unscrew the cover or do the preparation or all that. So sometimes they just need to be reminded of few details or just the highlight of the steps, the different steps of that procedure. So experienced users are bothered with the details and find this 40-page long procedure pretty annoying to go through and to read. So usually the way you can fix that UX issue is using what we call progressive disclosure, meaning if you tag your content properly, then you can hide some part of that content dynamically with expanding blocks. So depending on the profile of the user, the blocks could be expanded initially, then collapsed when not needed, or the other way, if you're very experienced, you could have all the blocks collapse and you have something shorter, and then you can just expand the parts that you need. So that's what is called progressive disclosure. But the problem with progressive disclosure, to make that work, you need to tag your content. You need to put tags inside the content to tell what sections could be collapsed or expanded, and for what profile and what types of user and what needs or what skills. So you see, you have to make your content ready for progressive disclosure, which is pretty tedious to do. So that's not an easy way. And also, when you have those long procedures, usually they are the foundational content, and they are used for deriving training material, quick overviews, and usually takes time because some people are in charge of reading this content and trying to make shorter notes, articles, whatever, from that, or training lessons. And if you update the content, they have to sort of see the diffs of what has changed inside the content to see how they would need to adapt the training material, modify it so that it reflects what has evolved in the dark. So you all know how it works in your companies, how cumbersome it is to derive this content, not only to derive content from this core material, but as well keep up to date with the content that is evolving. And good news, this is where GenAI is very, very, very good. GenAI is good at, let's call it largely, summarizing content. You can take any piece of content, short or long, and say, okay, make it a 1 page, 2 paragraphs, 10 lines, 1 page, 2 pages, or extract the main steps of that. So you can have GenAI do this dynamically, not statically, but really that becomes part of the UI at the delivery time. At any point in your content, when reading the content, you can have proposed interactions where the user can say, okay, I like this to be summarized, or I like this to be shorter, or can you show me the tools or the parts that are inside this procedure so that I can prepare my toolbox for tomorrow? But what are the parts that I should put in my truck so that I have everything that I need for tomorrow, and I don't have to drive back to the warehouse because I've forgotten some parts that I needed to be changed in the procedure. And usually you do that by creating tables at the beginning of procedures where you try to list all the tools or the parts. But again, when you update the content, you have to update those tables. In fact, you don't have to do that. GenAI is good as summarizing, extracting, creating a list from that. Or if you are a software vendor, or if your product have a bit of software in them, you have code blocks to give examples of code. And we all know that GenAI is good at explaining code, programming language, I mean code by programming language, explaining code, translating code from one language to another one. So when you write content, and usually if you were giving an example of code on how to do something, you were providing that example in Java, and then, I don't know, Python and JavaScript or whatever, and .NET, and you had to write or have someone write, your developers write 5, 10 times the same example in those different languages and maintain that up to date, which is not needed anymore, because now you can just say, okay, we need an example of code for that, how to do this in one language, and then you can just add into the UI a button that says, okay, I'd like to see this in whatever my language, Rust, say, I don't know, Node.js, or whatever. So you see, that's where GenAI is good, not only at summarizing, but transforming that content, that core content that you propose and that is displayed on the screen, to make it more efficient and adapted to the needs of the user at that moment. So it's super, super efficient for that. And that's really a game changer, but we'll talk about it later as well. Another use case number 5, is about search itself. So it's reinventing the search experience. So first, probably worth mentioning here that search has, just like machine translation, search has evolved a lot in the past 5-10 years. Modern search technology is leveraging and using language models. I'm not talking about Elasticsearch, all those TF-IDF models from 50 years ago. I'm talking about very, very recent technology that is based on language models. So for those of you that are Free Topics customers, that's the search technology we have in Free Topics based on language models, probabilistic relevance and all that. So it has evolved a lot. There's a lot behind that. And the beginning of language models before becoming large language models was for small language models and for search. And then it was used for large language models as well. So they enable this modern search technology enables dynamic ranking. You can use any parameter on the fly in the query to re-rank the results. You can inject in the query the profile of the user to adapt the result to the user profile. So it's super good, super efficient. But the UX is still keyword driven. It's still keyword-based search, even though it's now highly relevant and deliver personalized results, but very much like what you have on Google or what you do when you do web search, it's keyword driven. And then came, as opposed to that, we have now large language models. Large language models are good at, it's in the name, manipulating natural language. They are good at understanding queries and long queries and the phrases that you type and can generate those replies. So you know what I mean by that. Probably you've all played with ChatGPT. So this is large language models. Now the problem is that these large language models are trained on generic content, billions of pages of content, okay, or at least hundreds of millions, and they are just modeling the language itself, not any knowledge, particular knowledge, but just the language, generally speaking. Probably part of that content that has been used to train the LLMs have been about products similar to yours, or maybe a bit of your content that has been collected on the web, but not specifically your content. Your content maybe plus millions and millions of pages of content. So they are generic. They are not specific, meaning that using them for out of the box for replying to questions about your product won't work. So now people say we need to fine-tune the models. Well, whatever it means, we can discuss that later as part of the questions at the end if you have questions. But you don't fine-tune a core model, a foundational model. You don't fine-tune ChatGPT. You can fine-tune the activation level, but not the core model itself. And it's very expensive anyway to train and to run fine-tuned models. So, and it's not the way it goes. I mean, if you look at the scientific articles, paper work, you don't need to train a language model to solve the problem. The way it works today is you combine search, small language models, your content with large language models that are generic. You don't retrain large language models, you combine and articulate those two sets of content, assuming an LLM is a set of content, and the search about your content. And then when you combine that in a proper way, that becomes magic, okay? So you can do crazy stuff, and that you can do search result consolidation. I will give you an example. You can do question answering. You can do chatbots on your products. You can do a lot of things, but it's not made by retraining LLMs. It's made by articulating local search at your content level plus LLMs. So let's look at, for example, keyword-based search. So that's Google. And here the example I used is a simple query, SAML versus OAuth. Okay, so it's a single sign-on protocols. So if you run that search on Google, you will have results that are documents. Well, not even documents, pointer to documents, pointer to pages, which are pointer to documents. So you need to click on that and a link that will open a page, and then you can read the content. Now, what Bing has added, and as you know, they are very close to ChatGPT, they have invested billions in ChatGPT, 10 billion. They have started leveraging this capability of using both search and LLMs. And that's the result. That's how they made it, they brought it to life. So you see, if I run the same search, SAML versus OAuth, I first have this block where there's text. It's not links. It's not a summary of a page, a particular page, an extract of a page with keywords highlighted. It's really content. And that content is generated by a GenAI. And it says, and Bing is clear about it. It says, we are using GenAI based on multiple online sources. It's exactly what I described. It's not generated by the AI itself, because to be relevant, it's just, in fact, running a search, just like Google, takes the first result, go to the pages that are behind those results, get the content from those 4, 5, 6 results, take all that creates probably 10 pages of content, so to say, and send that to GenAI and say, GenAI, summarize, or make it something like this. So there's a prompt that instructs the LLM to create this block of content that is then injected in the search result page. So it's very different. It's not search, It's not pure LLM working by themselves. It's just taking part of those first results that you see below, like this Okta, SAML versus Oath, and the rest, and the next ones, like it tells Stack Overflow, Auth0.com, StrongDM, and one more. So taking those results, extracting the content, and using GenAI on that. That is how it works. So that's interesting because what they did is, in fact, they kept the same UI. You start with keyword search, but even though you are using keywords, they start using LLMs to provide you with something that you don't have to click on the links below. If you may be able to find the result that you need here, and then you won't leave the search result page because you don't have necessarily to click on the links to get to the content. And they keep you on that page. Okay, so it's local. But we can see as well that near this search tab, they have added a chat tab. And if you click on the chat tab, then they propose you another way of interacting with the system. And then you would write, explain the difference between SAML and Oath, please. So because that's how you would talk in a chat. And then in fact, the system tells you, okay, you want me to search for SAML versus Oath. They generate the answer, which is exactly the same. If you look back, they are the same, or the prompt may be a bit different to make it shorter, but basically it's doing the same. It's running a search, getting the content, the first result, extracting the content that is behind those first results, and then summarize this content to make it a short answer, and then say, okay, do you have more questions you want me to refine, blah, 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 and then that becomes a chat, but it starts with a query. So that's the way it works. So you have this different way of, a bit different way of interacting. So all these possibilities that I've described here from, which are, if you see what let me go back here, search result consolidation, that's what I've shown you. It's like really taking the search result, but instead of generating a block of content from that, consolidating the result, answering a question, which is more like the chat mode like, and then having a different UI where instead of remaining on the search result page like this, you could move to a different UI, which is a chat. And say, okay, you have more questions, by the way, and then switch progressively from keyword-based search to chat mode, something like that. So these are the new search experiences that you can create with generative AI. But again, important to understand that we're not talking about fine-tuning, training an LLM for that. We are just using both using both your content that has to be indexed, that can be keyword, that can be embeddings and vector database with embeddings somewhere to extract the piece of content that has to be needed, and then send that over to an LLM to get this summarization and all these things that I've shown you. So the opportunity here is huge from a business perspective, because you can really increase case deflection, make it easier for your users to find the answers they need. You can propose and offer to your users a new user experience that make them spend more time searching for content and for the results they need, the info they need, as opposed to having a lousy search engine, badly working, badly tuned, and then after 2 searches, people really feel they won't find what they need. They don't even know if it's existing, and then they rapidly go to a help desk tool and they open a case, and then you have to deal with those cases, which cost a fortune. So here, by having something that is more not only efficient but playful as well with those new user experiences, you can expect a huge decrease in cases, which means increase in case deflection. Which leads me to my last point, which is the 6th use case we're doing, and I will show you, which is augmenting support agents. So number 5, as we've seen, you can really lower the number of tickets, drastically lower the number of cases that are opened by your customers because they find the info they need. But still, if at some point they don't find it, or you're not changing for the moment, in putting GenAI on the search side, you can use that internally to augment and help your support agents. So live of a support agents. Cases that are opened by customers are usually of 2-3 categories, but when you look at them, they are either very boring because they are simple, always the same question. You know, this Pareto rule 80-20. It's like 80% of the cases, maybe like, how do I do this? How do I fix that? Which is heavily documented. It's there, but they don't find it. They don't search. People open a ticket, open a case, and you have to solve that. And that makes support agents' jobs very boring, very tedious, because they feel like they are always replying to the same question. And probably they would like so much to reply a TFM to those customers. So what they do usually as well, when their reply is not exactly in the doc as it should be, or the good reply is spread over multiple manuals, they tend to recreate knowledge-based articles by copying and pasting content so that they can just then copy that back in as a reply to a case or send a link to that. So that's where you start having content duplication, with the challenge that I've mentioned before, that you need to make sure that those articles, those knowledge-based articles, are always in sync with the product as the product and the core content evolves. So it comes with challenges. Or we've seen companies trying to build chatbots, and I'm talking about chatbots 3, 4, 5 years ago, very tedious to build, not that efficient. So that's where we are. And on the other side, we have cases that are super complex. I mean, you have customers that are very advanced use cases, complex issues to solve, and they ask questions that are very difficult to answer, which takes time to reply. And usually your support agents, because they see that question once every 6 months or a year, or never seen that question, they have to go to experts, interrupt them and say, oh, I don't find that in the doc, or I don't understand how this part of the doc could apply to that question. How does that work? So I guess you all have that around you in your company, with the risk if agents don't find the info or don't have the info in the doc, or start writing incomplete, incorrect replies, which is a problem as well. So that's where we are. And on top of that, as you know, usually high turnover in these support agent teams. It's difficult to find level 3 experts. It's long to train them, run them up, make them efficient, level 1, level 2, level 3. And then they leave, then you have to hire more people, new people, then train them again, takes time again. So that's not I mean, that's a challenge for all the companies. And again, that's where, and this is how it works. As a support agent, if I'm new, I have a case, okay, that I have to deal with, find a reply. I go to the whatever content we have. Let's say you have 3 topics. Lucky you, 1 single access point, unified knowledge repository, run a search, find the answer, copy the link, copy the content, whatever you want, put that back in the case and reply to the, and that's the process. GenAI to the rescue, once again. GenAI can be amazingly useful here. This is how it works. Imagine that, and I will show you a real life example, that GenAI, in fact, can be used for reading the case, and generate the reply to that case automatically. And then only in your process, if you want, you can have the agents check and adapt the replies before submitting that, but at least they don't have to research everything and do everything by themselves. And let me show you, because we use that internally and we have real screenshots to share. So that's how we started. We started by an external tool to evaluate the efficiency of GenAI for solving real life cases opened by our customers. So this is a one, so FTHD 2793. So FTHD means Free Topics Help Desk. So that's ticket number 2793. And the question is, does Free Topics support publishing in ebook format? If so, is there a special connector? And what you see here is the answer written by GenAI, not by a support agent. And that's true. We can ingest ebook, but we don't output ebook format. We can output in PDF format, for example, if you need static content, but reply is good. And we also have the links to the documentation that is supporting the reply. So that's how it works. So you see, that's pretty good, because we did nothing. We just checked and say, use GenAI and say, can you write the reply to that question based on the content that we have? Another example, which I love a lot, I've seen we've got, I think I'm not disclosing any secret here, but it's really real life question from Teradata, and it's about a word connector. So we have a connector that where you can publish Word files, and it's restructuring the Word files automatically as if it was structured content. And you can configure this connector, give the connector some hints in a configuration file called the stylemap.yaml. So the question was, how do I do this, blah, blah, blah. And what is interesting is that the reply that is generated by the GenAI not only is good, says how to do it, but the GenAI has even written an example of how to write the configuration file itself. So the GenAI has replied and generated code to reply to that case. So after some tests, we found it so interesting that what we did, we integrated it in our real help desk, which is, as you see here, a Jira. So we're using Jira Service Desk. And what you see here is a real example, real question. And same, what we do, the way we have integrated here is that the very moment takes not even a second, the case is opened by a customer, one. Then we have a bot, and you see it's a help desk. Help desk suggested this answer. It's a product bot, so it's a bot doing it, which is GenAI, in fact, that is reading the question, the case, looking at the documentation and generating the reply, always providing links to the sources, to the content itself that is supporting this reply. But as you can see, we keep it internal initially, and we have, because we're still very cautious about GenAI in general, and so we keep it internal. It's the role of the support agent to check the reply, verify if it's right, or if something is missing, they can edit the reply, and then they make it public. They send it to the customers. That's how we chose to implement it. You could publish that automatically and say it's proposed by the bot, but for us, we made it part of a workflow where the support agents have to check the reply. And we had examples that were pretty even more amazing. We didn't expect. So we have few customers in France, and one day we had a question in French, which is pretty unusual because 99% of our customers are abroad, well, global, and usually everything is in English. But here the question was in French, and it was about how to change a certificate and something like that. Interestingly, even though the question was in French, the bot was able to understand the question and write the reply. The reply was generated in English because the prompt that we had engineered didn't even imagine this situation, but we could rewrite. I don't know if we did it since then. We could have changed the prompt, say, and by the way, write the reply in the same language as the question, please. And then we would have had a reply in French, question in French, reply in French, even though the documentation itself is only existing in English because we don't have documentation in French, I can tell you. So I found it pretty amazing. And the more we use it, the more we have started embedding GenAI in our tool and processes, the more we find situations like that and use cases and say, oh my God, it's pretty cool, it works well. So the opportunity for you here is automate the reply to cases. You can reduce time to handle tickets and cases by at least 50%. And you can, for example, accelerate the ramp up of the new agents, because as a new agent, say you've got this case here from the customer and nothing is suggested. Well, if you don't know what will the support agent do, the newly arrived support agent, they will read the question, try to understand, maybe ask a colleague or start running searches internally, read the doc, not really knowing where to look at and spend time to write that. But here, because we have the bot pre-generating the answer, and more importantly, telling what part of the doc is supporting the answer, then a newly arrived agent, a new agent can just click on those links, still read the doc, but at least focus on the part of the doc that is exactly adapted to what's needed for replying to that ticket, and then check if the reply that has been written by the bot is valid, and then learn on the fly. So you see what I mean? It's not the same reading and validating something that's starting from a blank page and having to read everything. So there's a huge opportunity to change and transform the way support agents are involved in the process and ramped up and learn about your products. So those were the 6 use cases we have tried and wanted to share with you today. And then my last 2 points were, why a CDP? Do you need a CDP? You need a CDP for that. I mean, a CDP, it's not static content. I mean, it's not, free topics, not like we ingest content, we generate static HTML, PDFs, we put a search on top, and a reading website, a website on top of pre-generated content. A CDP like free topics is exactly about what I described here. We are not only ingesting the content, transforming the content, and enriching the content, but we create language models of your specific content. We enrich the content. We have these small language models. We extract metadata. We compute the embeddings, which are necessary, which are other indexes that help articulating with generative AI by finding the piece of information. And so it's both searching with keyword search and embedding. So it's part of what is what's in the system. So that's why that's the job of a real CDP, is giving you this layer that normally is hidden of content analysis, content enrichment, multiple types of indexes, and making all that work with external language models, which is why in free topics, and for those of you that are customers, it's going to be available next week. You see now we have this generative AI entry in the admin UI where you can create profiles, which are use cases you want to do, like summarize, extract keywords, translate, and then you can write the prompt. So we don't show them here, but we have written prompts that are specific to those use cases, and you can choose your external LLM provider, and then articulate your content that is inside free topics with these external LLMs, using prompts and refining prompts and writing your own prompts if you want. So this is what free topics is doing for you when it comes to generative AI. Not mentioning the UI itself. Which leads me to my last, very rapidly, my last point, this one more thing. When I was preparing that, and since we've started working on GenAI and integrating GenAI in free topics, the more we were making progress around that subject and integrating that into the project, the more it became obvious that the real challenge is not about the large language models. I was talking about initially on privacy, or you may have questions about hallucination and stuff like that. But if you articulate your content with LLMs, you can control that. I mean, that will work. Okay, the prime is not there. For me, the prime is about the interface. It's about defining new user experiences. I think we're at risk here, and you've seen that through Bing. So the first screenshots I've shared, where you see that even Bing has, for the moment, just taken the UI as it is today, the UI and the UX of Bing, and just inserted a block at the beginning of the search results, which is the sort of the summarization of the results, and has added a chat tab, but it's like overloading the existing UI. And where there's a challenge and there's a risk as well is trying to implement what we believe are breakthrough features in existing interfaces. And that can lead at some point to very, very tedious user experience. Imagine that I told you about summarization, translation, show me tools, show me parts, and the more prompts you write and the more ideas you have about what you can do with GenAI, if you start putting that as buttons or menu entries in your UI, that become overloaded and that become counterproductive. So you see here, there's a challenge that is, how will we, and I don't have the reply today, but what we have seen by integrating AI in free topics and doing it for ourselves is that at some point we will have to work on reinventing new user experiences and new UIs. Not to mention the fact that when you play, and just this one, when you go on Google for searching on the web, you type 2 keywords and it takes 100 milliseconds, not even that, before you have replies. And the relevance is good enough that you know the reply is in the first 2 results and it's good for you. You click and you have your reply. Meaning that overall, the moment you open the page, you type the keywords, you get the first result, you click on 1 or 2 links and you get to the final content that you need. It's about a few seconds if you're good at searching, which I think it's the case. But if you now remember when you've been trying ChatGPT, you have to type, can you explain the difference between a salmon and an oath, which takes like 50 seconds to type, not mentioning if you do it with your mobile. It's going to take me 2 minutes to write that. And then you have to wait like 20 seconds so that this content gets generated and displayed on your screen, which is fun when you're playing with ChatGPT and discovering. But if you have to find the answer rapidly to a problem, spending 20 seconds reading something that's right slowly on your screen and maybe realize that the question is not that and you have to ask something more, it's going to take you 5 minutes. You see what I mean? So it's not that fast. It's impressive. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, but the UX itself from a chat like this is not that good as it is today. So I think we are very much into the beginning of how to use that, how to integrate that into our workflows and processes. And I will finish with this one. You remember, well, I think probably Jarvis in Iron Man is a bit of GenAI and ChatGPT, something like that. But when Stark was home, he was not typing something on his finger. It was all about the UI and the UX that they had designed around this smart thing, Jarvis thing. And you feel that that was appealing because of the UI itself, not just of the technology. I think that's the challenge we have in front of us is we have to rethink the entire UX that we can provide when we'll be able to fully leverage these AI capabilities. This is it. That's for today. Key takeaways. I think that your job is not at risk if you're a tech writer, because as I said, the knowledge needs to be created and the truth established. An LLM cannot write about a new product that you have created and does not know the details. So you still have to write the content. Someone has to write it. But again, by leveraging GenAI, you can change the way that content is written in your company. That was point number one. I think that's probably, if you don't have that, the moment to consider a content-heavy platform, because that's the foundation where all your content is consolidated, combined to create a single source. And that's on that single source of content that aggregates reference documentation, past cases, knowledge-based articles that are in your whatever support help desk tool, all the silos that you have. If you want to make GenAI work, you need first to create a single source, unify that content, and this is what a CDP is meant for. Plus, GenAI, well integrated, you need to trace everything, still secure the content, make sure that you generate a reply by using content that user has access to. So all that needs to be put in place, and that's what a CDP does. And I think last point, that really the opportunities are way beyond what we can imagine today. So I have described here 6 use cases. We have few tens more in mind that we are discussing, experimenting internally. But I think it's really the beginning, and I think that's just because we are still limited by the UI, the UX that we have, and the faith that we have in the capability of GenAI and where GenAI is today. But I think that's really going to be fun time in front of us, and there's lots more to be done. So I hope you enjoyed this. You can ask any question. Thank you. So I can look at the questions now. Let me see. Steve says, thank you and interesting. Thank you, Steve. I think another reason for a risk. It's about change management. I think, yeah, Steve is right. problem we have is like we're slow to evolve and make changes in the way we work. It's going to be interesting. Another question. Okay, so that's from Loni. Loni, customer of Free Topics, using Free Topics, says interesting in what tools we have used to solve some of these issues at Free Topics. Well, the tool is Free Topics itself. Back to what I've explained previously, the tool that we've used for what I've shown you, like case deflection and replying automatically to tickets, it's always the same. It's a combination of both internal, what Free Topics provides in terms of search capabilities and embeddings and all that, plus an external LLM. In our case, we have used ChatGPT, ChatGPT 3.5 model, and just making that work together. So out of the box, I would say Free Topics plus ChatGPT. Could be direct ChatGPT or ChatGPT on Azure if you want, and if you want more, if you want to be more in control of that. And Lenny says, oh yeah, that said, I realized that Free Topics has a great search AI. We already used that. Thank you, Lenny. Sean, okay, great example of points. Question, are you sending us this presentation? We haven't planned to set the presentation. We could, but you'll be able as well to attend, to review this presentation whenever you need. So it's going to be online after that. Well, one question is, so how much of these 6 scenarios can we do now with FT? What skills, people, and resources do we need to implement these GenAI solutions? Good question. What do you need to make that work? Like I've shown you 2 examples. Like I could, it's not a product demo, so I won't do it. But we have that in Free Topics, like summarize, translate. We have that in Free Topics. The only thing you need, if you want to do your own thing, you have your own ideas, is prompt engineering, because everything is about prompting. So I don't know if you're familiar with that concept, but everything is about prompting the external LLM. So Free Topics is in charge of collecting the info. You see here the prompt for summarize. The prompt is naive here because it had to fit into the box here for the screenshot. It's please summarize the following topic, column, topic content. And the topic content, it's a template, a profile, it's a prompt template that you can create. So it can be longer than this, and you can put placeholders that Free Topics will dynamically feed with the content, the query, the whatever you have, the language of the UI. So if the language of the UI is in whatever Japanese, but the content is in German, and whatever the topic has this metadata, you could use any of that to refine the prompt, and your prompt can be dynamic, and we have a templating engine for generating the final prompt that is sent to the LLM. So so here, naive prompt, if you click you're on a topic and you have a summarize button, as I've shown, we have it for real. The screenshot here where I've shown you was fake, but we have it in Free Topics now. And if you click on summarize, you have a pop-up and you have a summary. And it's just taking the content, taking the prompt, generating the final prompt that is sent to the LLM. Free Topics gets that back automatically for you, deals with the security. All that is out of the box. All that is ready to use. So whenever you want, you can try. It's it's going to be available to our customers next week in beta mode, but we already use it internally. Any question? Have you tried? Did any of you try that, or have you already started implementing GenAI on your tech content, or have you run experiments? Are you facing any specific issues that you want to share here? Nope. Okay. I don't see any new question here. Well, again, maybe it's late. We're past the hour. Again, if you have any question, if you want to get a demo of that, if you want to share something that is specific to your use case, your situation, your needs, feel free to reach out. info@freetopics.com. We'll be there. We can show you, we can give you demos, discuss your needs, use cases. So anytime.
That was wonderful. Thank you so very much. Very interesting. A lot to think about.
It's all about what we can imagine, really.
It is. It is.
It is. What is it our users need? Oh, more questions. We're running into issue. I got one. We are running into issues getting AI to say no. It's about the prompt. That's the part of the prompt engineering, when how you prompt the system and how much of your content you send to the LLM, and how you craft the prompt to say if you don't. That's part of the trickiness of the prompt. It's like, if you don't know the answer, please don't answer, stuff like that. So you have to create pretty advanced prompt. That's why I was saying that a huge part of the work is about the prompt engineering, because the rest, which is having your content ready, extracting from the doc the parts of the doc that are related to the question, to the whatever, making that part of a prompt, all that is already into Free Topics, really available for you. But writing the prompts the right way is a science in itself, which we are trying, but we are not prompt experts here. And we have let Free Topics very open, so that our customers will be able to write and test their own prompts as well. So, which is fun. So you can do that. You can write your own prompts and do crazy stuff, because you can imagine that you write prompts that are just for trying, and that you put that in some UI as part of your staging Free Topics environment, or some pages of your doc portal that are restricted to internal users, and then you could do some crazy tries about, okay, let's try to have the GenAI do this with our content, so make it a poem or whatever. I mean, it doesn't make sense for tech content, I know, but really the prompt could be, okay, make it a poem, or I don't know, make it dialogue between two people, or whatever, make it look like Shakespeare. Or I mean, I will do that. Probably we'll try to do the sort of crazy prompts that have no business validity, but that could be fun to see that apply on the fly. So
I'd like to see some song lyrics. That'd be fun.
Nah, that's it. Make it a song lyric. No, that's right. That's typically sort of prompt you can write, and because again, all is dynamic. You create a new prompt in the UI using Free Topics. You create a new prompt. You write a prompt with a profile, and you just put a pop-up or a button somewhere that says, when people click there, do this profile with the content that is on the screen, or the current topic or the current section. Take the current section of the content and make it a song, make it lyrics. That would be the prompt, and that's and you can try that.
That would be
You'll
fun.
show me. That will be fun. I'm sure. Okay.
Yeah, we've pretty much taken our time, and thank you so very much. Just as a reminder, we will be sending out the recording to all those who registered, and also you will be able to find this and all past webinars on the CIDM website, and you post them as well on your website, don't you?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
So it's available, and I'm sure you'll be referring to it, because there was a lot of knowledge sharing. I know I will.
Okay. So thank you, Trish. Thank you all for having attended. Have a good day. Have a good night, and see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.